she's gone through some harassment, because nearly every woman has, and probably doesn't feel too good about what has happened and seen happen to other folks. But in this case, you have to have some kind of way to defend him, or at least say that her response to his Tucker behavior, which maybe she doesn't agree with, but AOC has done worse. If we don't demonize the person that we need to make sure is the boogeyman for every other future discussion, debate, conversation, legislation, it's just not worth it, right? So no matter what the conversation is, AOC is limiting your First Amendment rights because her feelings got hurt, apparently, from a guy who literally on air said, I'm thinking about a booty call with AOC. And if anyone else said it, it's how disgusting is that? Where'd you get that from? Because no one else did. Now, really fast, because I want to remind you guys what he did say. Let's watch this really fast again.
Me to retire. By the way, the person who wrote this didn't even perceive how creepy it was. I'm alone today, Ocasio-Cortez says pointedly at the camera. Is it just us, or does that sound like an invitation to a booty call? Maybe one step from what are you wearing? Either way, it's a little strange. It's definitely oversharing.
Okay, so by the way, maybe Kim is right. AOC does need some thicker skin. She's an elected official. You're gonna get some pushback. There's gonna be people that don't agree with your legislation. There's people that are just not gonna agree with all these things you always say. You're always putting yourself out there. You're always on Instagram, you're always on Twitter, and you're always making these speeches. So you're gonna get some pushback, right? You're a United States representative. Maybe, or maybe you're this guy. Let's look at this headline from just last June. As they discovered, Trump wanted his Justice Department to stop SNL from teasing him. Now she did mention make fun of. AOC should be able to be allowed to make fun of by journalists. Tucker Carlson's not one, but should be made fun of. So more from the Daily Beast on that. In 2019, Mr. Trump asked the White House aides and lawyers whether the Department of Justice or the Federal Communications Commission could investigate SNL along with other late night shows that ridiculed him. The shows, his advertisers explained, were all clearly satirical, which meant that they were protected as free speech under that First Amendment that apparently AOC is trying to subvert. He also tweeted about it. He wasn't hiding it. It's truly incredible that shows like Saturday Night Live, Not Funny, No Talent, can spend all their time knocking the same person, me, God, we don't need any more of your clarifications, over and over, without so much as a mention of the other side. The former president tweeted, as at the time when he was mad about them making fun of him, should FEC and or the FCC look into this? There must be collusion with the Democrats and of course, Russia. Yeah, he must have been joking on that part. And according to the Beast report, Mr. Trump also singled out late night comedy host Jimmy Kimmel for daring to make fun of him as well. But as aides repeatedly told former President Trump, neither SNL or Jimmy Kimmel Live could be punished for satirizing the president. Still, he said to them, can something else be done about it? This guy, man, no lie. We just talked about his new Truth Social, and one of the main rules is don't make fun of me. You'll be kicked off this free speech platform if you make fun of me. None of that has to be taken into account as long as we're making a boogeyman that we've already made out of AOC, and that anything else that she says, proposes, mentions, pushes back on, defends herself over, it's just BS because she's against your First Amendment rights. Please talk to your former president because he's still on that. That's the end of the Thursday show, you guys. Thank you for joining me. I apologize for the attitude and anger today. I'll be back tomorrow. And we're gonna have more fun to wrap up week 5 here on the watch list. Up next is the damage report with John Iadarola. And until tomorrow, I'll be watching.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the times we're in. I'm John Iadarola, joined today on the program by the president of the Waldorf Nation, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here.
Good to be here at the end times.
Exactly. We are living in times that are shocking, and as people have pointed out on Twitter, precedented. We are living in precedented times. And so we will, of course, be talking about the big news story of the day. And I'm gonna guess at least the week. Gonna be the big news story of at least the week. And that'll, of course, be the invasion of Ukraine. But Jeff, very glad to have you here because we got a lot of other important stuff to talk about as well through the course of the next 90 minutes or so. We're gonna be talking about the multi-pronged attack on the trans community here inside of the United States. We've got cops behaving badly. We definitely have Texas Governor Greg Abbott behaving badly across a wide spectrum of topics. So if you're not a fan of Republicans and especially not a fan of Greg Abbott, you're going to enjoy today's program. We also, unfortunately, will be talking about Candace Owens. That's much later in the program, so that'll be coming up later. Please hit the like button and share the stream if you haven't already so that people know we're live. With all that said, Jeff, we have a lot to talk about. So are you ready to do this thing?
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it with this.
Russia has declared war on Ukraine. As soon as the declaration, oh, that's a missile. That's a missile. That's a missile.
That was one of those like
holy.
So in that video, you have a reporter being shocked by a specific missile flying overhead, sort of mirroring how I think many people processed the news of last night. If you were like me, you were on Twitter and you realized, oh, it's happening. It's happening now. This thing that we apparently now with hindsight have been building towards for weeks, and also the groundwork of it for years at this point. But it has happened. The invasion of Ukraine, beyond just declaring the independence of a couple of disputed territories and promising to send in peacekeeping forces. No, missiles were sent in, bombs were sent in, helicopters, tanks, and troops were sent in. We're gonna have more footage as well as more details. But Jeff, tell me a little bit about your reaction as this was developing.
Well, I mean, first, let me just say that I want to have solidarity with the Ukrainian people that are stuck in the middle of this. Look, I'm going to say that I was originally quite skeptical that this is actually going to happen. And then when it happened, it's like, oh, so that happened. It was real. Oh, no. And look, let me just ask you a quick question here. When you heard about this, and I should say to the lead up of this, were you also a bit skeptical? I mean, reports coming out of like the State Department and things like that, and knowing the United States' propensity for this rhetoric, especially when we talk about going back to 2016 and how it's been Russia, 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 Russia. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. And then suddenly in Ukraine, the wolf showed up. And so it was kind of a shock to a lot of us, I think, on the left that like we vastly underestimated Putin's, mindset when it came to invading Ukraine, and that he had actually had this plan for what seemed to be quite some time.
Yeah, exactly, and might potentially have plans beyond that, which we'll turn to shortly. I will say, I did not expect that an all-out invasion would actually happen. I was pretty clear about that. I've also been much more importantly clear that I am by no means an expert on Ukraine or Eastern Europe. There are areas that I think I have a good amount of knowledge in. This is not one of them. That said, it might be that I didn't buy it as much, but for different reasons than you, potentially. Or and I don't want to misconstrue what you're saying there. I didn't think it would happen because it would be so significant and potentially economically damaging, as well as damaging in terms of the international relationship of Russia. It wasn't that I didn't think it was going to happen necessarily specifically because I didn't trust what Biden or the State Department was saying. Obviously, you should not necessarily trust what the president, the State Department, the CIA, or anything says, especially in matters of war. But it was a little bit harder for me to totally discount what they were saying when, at least in this case, there were well over 100,000 troops that had been moved to a border. That is a little bit harder to totally discount than, no, we've got a photo, and I swear under this little gray bump, there's a nuclear weapon. It's a little bit more real. That said, I didn't think it would happen. And now it is happening. And it is real, as you said, solidarity with the Ukrainian people, some of which have already died. Families have lost people. They're saying at least 40 soldiers killed. I am going to throw out another prediction that hopefully will turn out to be as wrong as all of my others, that when you bomb multiple airports, military bases, like you did not kill just 40 people. So that number is almost certainly going to go up. In terms of civilian deaths, I know that people have been fleeing from the city centers. There was a massive traffic jam moving out of the capital of Kiev last night. And yeah, it is very real. It is something that we get to debate and that others get to debate in an even stupider and griftier way. But it is real for those people, those who have already died, those who will die, those who right now are terrified about the future of their country.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of reports of the runs on gas stations and supplies for people that are trying to flee towards more towards NATO, basically the borders of the NATO countries. And so it always, speaking of some of the people who I guess didn't quite buy that this was going to happen, and they were saying like, well, or even were supporting Putin's move. And we've certainly seen some of that from some of the bad hot takes on Twitter, especially. But okay, so they're going into a place where they say, well, we don't like NATO on our borders. You're going to go invade a country that's even closer to NATO. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. You know what I mean? Weird. Very strange.
Yeah. Well,
so again, it suggests to me that this was in planning for quite some time, and that it really wasn't.
Yeah.
That argument doesn't seem to hold a lot of water.
Yeah, or at the very least, I've been saying for a long time, it can't be the entirety of it. It can be a component potentially. I don't think that is the wholly genuine account of why Vladimir Putin wanted to do this. In any event, as we've been saying, we want to make sure that you understand this is real. So I want to play a little bit more video footage. There's a lot going around. I am trying to restrict ourselves to stuff that seems very carefully vetted as being true. In days like this, misinformation, including video misinformation, is rife. So tread carefully. But that said, here's a little bit more footage.
Вже штук 20 пролетіло. Не видно українського герба. Точно російські. Прямо над хатами. Прямо ось над хатами літають, падли. Полетіли в сторону аеропорта. Бомблять аеропорт. Чути, що йде бій. Вже штук 30 нарахував точно.
Okay, so there's a lot of footage of explosions from last night, missiles flying overhead, troop movements, as well as wreckage on the ground and everything. We do want to zoom out just a little bit. I want to show you a map. It's one of the better maps that I've seen to give an idea of the scale of this. This is not simply an invasion of eastern Ukraine. They have hit a variety of points effectively over the entire geographic expanse of Ukraine, including some of the most heavily populated areas. I want to give you just a little bit of what Putin was saying at the time. He gave a speech timed seemingly specifically for when the first missiles would hit, saying that he is ordering troops into Ukraine, but made clear his target goes beyond this to America's, quote, empire of lies. And he threatened, quote, consequences you have never faced in your history for, quote, anyone who tries to interfere with us. He reminded the world, if we needed to be reminded, that they have one of the most powerful nuclear states, an arsenal of obviously thousands of nuclear weapons of a variety of types. And they have a certain advantage in several cutting edge weapons, which could just be generalized bragging about the fact that they have thousands of nukes or some reference to hypersonic nuclear ICBMs or something like that. In any event, he said that there should be no doubt that any potential aggressor will face defeat and ominous consequences should it directly attack our country. So generalized threats specifically about the potential deployment of nuclear weapons. So yes, Jeff, things have escalated quite a bit throughout this week.
Yeah, I look at that video and that is dystopian. I mean, that is everything essentially that we have feared from this potential conflict turning into an actual conflict. And going back and referencing that map, you're right. It's not in just the Donetsk and Luhansk regions that they declared to be independent states. No, they're attacking a sovereign state. The rest of the country is under assault.
Yeah.
And it really is just a horrible, terrifying situation, especially once again, going back to the people of Ukraine who are suffering under this. It really is a terrible situation. And going back to the threats that Putin is making, I mean, I could think a part of that is especially like, oh, we're going to make bellicose threats, as most, I think, world leaders generally do. You can only go back to the kind of threats that Donald Trump would make. My button's bigger than your button. Not quite as, I don't quite know the word that I'm looking for on that, but much more of a measured response from Putin than Trump. But then you can also go back to things that George W. Bush, Obama, with the red lines, and so you can expect a little bit of bellicose rhetoric. But at the same time, that is scary because there is the threats of nuclear war, and that is the thing that can basically destroy humanity several times over if there is a prolonged nuclear, exchange. And I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen or has a big chance of happening, but any even a small little chance. Look, I love playing the game Fallout. I don't want to live in it. If there's a 1% chance of that happening, I'm not at all interested.
Yeah, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in modern warfare. I'm not interested in any of this, obviously.
No Call of Duty.
Yeah, and I wasn't interested when Trump was promising fire and fury and everything. I am not interested in disconnected, like insane billionaires gambling with our lives as the currency, just so that they can feel powerful. And don't like it when it's Trump, don't like it when it's Putin. Feel some sort of obligation to be against both of those, actually. And Obama as well, and George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. If you're against war, if you're against imperialism, you should be against all of it and not have like a little star and then maybe references to specifically where it applies. No, all of it actually.
Yeah, no. Here.
Exactly. Biden, who will be speaking later on today, responded in real time saying Mr. Putin had chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. He has made clear, as he did prior to this, that no American troops will be sent to Ukraine. His European allies have taken the same position, so that has been the message from the beginning. They are not sending troops in. In any event, I do want to let you know about a few things that have been developing before we went live, including news of Ukrainian forces battling Russian forces in Chernobyl. They are saying there's concern about the possible breach of the dome that has sealed in the material there. Again, these are the sorts of things that in the literal heat of battle, who knows how accurate that is. Another thing to potentially be worried about. There are also protests going on inside Russia against the war. One reporter, a Moscow reporter, said there were over 1,000 people in an anti-war protest. I saw other reports, although again, do not consider these confirmed in the first day of a war, that over 400 people at those Russian protests had been hauled away and arrested. So bear that in mind. Also reports of Poland letting in Ukrainians without documents. Again, do not consider any of these massively confirmed at this point. But in any event, we're all just trying to catch up, trying to understand what is happening, where this is likely to go. Because of Vladimir Putin, who can move from one day of peacekeeping forces will be deployed to bombing the presidential mansion and invading, God only knows what next week could bring. Any other thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me just go back to peacekeeping. I love how they call them peacekeeping forces. Has peacekeeping forces ever been not a euphemism for just normal soldiers? Because it seems to be whenever they're in somewhere to so-called keep the peace, they never seem to keep the peace. Very strange.
Yeah, I noticed that pattern. Someone in the chat is saying, according to CNN, Chernobyl has been seized by Russian troops. So take that for what it's worth. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me just add one more thing too on the Russian protest. That's really good to see. Actually, I saw the videos of that, and again, grain of salt, but on how widespread that they are. But if there's enough people that are openly defying Vladimir Putin, it kind of shows that maybe there's a spark of hope here, and that the Russian people have as much of a distaste in having a war in Ukraine as the American people. Because you look at some of the polls, very few Americans want any sort of war in Ukraine, especially for us to be able to get involved. And so I take that as a good sign of just the war weariness of the world. Been through too much, too many wars, too many conflicts, and I'm hoping maybe that some of that pressure might get to Vladimir Putin. Again, assuming he's a rational actor, which again, that's in doubt now. But I am hoping that there is some impact, some effect by seeing maybe not just isolated protests, but seeing a more anti-war organic protest movement growing in Russia and in other.
I hope that you're right. I don't necessarily believe that might end up being very optimistic, but you know what? Today I'll take some optimism.
We need it.
Oh, especially with how some have, been effectively like laying the groundwork for this, apologizing in advance of an invasion. But anyway, the reaction. I want everyone to be ready for what you're about to see coming out of the media about this, because things are going to get wild. And with that, they've already sort of moved into that territory. Let's go to this video.
Dangerous as you told me about the amphibious attack by Americans. You shouldn't be saying that, because you and everybody else shouldn't know about it. They should do that secretly, not be doing that through the great Laura Ingraham. They should be doing that secretly. Nobody should know that, Laura. And
that was the Russian. Those are the Russian amphibious landing.
No, I thought you said that. I thought you said that we were sending people in.
No, I did not. No. That would be news. That would be news.
All, and you know what? Hey, Laura, that's all we need. That'll be next. Okay.
No, you're not crazy. You did hear that correctly. In real time, former President Donald Trump stopped playing golf for a bit, put down the hamburger, and called into Fox News to respond to the launch of a war. And he believed somehow that American forces were landing in Ukraine in the middle of a war. And he was concerned about that, but really just that Laura Ingraham had spoiled it to the world. He didn't think that was significant. He didn't demand some sort of confirmation for that. This is a guy, they still get like intelligence reports out once they're out of office. He can call up military commanders, people tapped in, senators. And he just assumed, oh, I think I heard that US forces were launching, so I think you're being irresponsible and spoiling it. We should really, hope that they're more successful, that they move in, that they wipe out the Russian forces. This is a madman, Jeff, and a madman who is, and I'll just say this because I want people to be prepared, likely to be the commander in chief again in a couple of years. So bear that in mind.
Yeah, my favorite part about that is that this is the so-called anti-war president. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, American forces are going, well, they shouldn't tell anybody. That's his message. Oh, you shouldn't have spoiled it. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
If you're the anti-war president, why aren't you saying, oh, that would be a bad thing? I can't believe Biden would do something like that. What a terrible leader, getting us into another war. No, he doesn't care about that because he's never really been anti-war. He just says that because it's a populist position. And so he's disingenuous about pretty much everything that he says. And to boot, he's just incredibly stupid. He's not a smart person, not the smartest person, not the greatest, most tremendous person.
He's not.
No, he's not a very stable genius at all.
No,
nothing in that.
Totally right,
nothing in that phrase is true.
No, not at all. So you can see in the way that he attempted to cover himself after it's saying, "Oh yeah, no, okay, well yeah, I hope that they don't, because that's the last thing we need." You were totally cool with it 8 seconds ago. Your only concern that you stated was that we're giving away the game.
8 seconds is honestly, an eternity.
Exactly. I don't have much expectations for him. Laura Ingraham corrected him, so that's good. Doesn't seem bothered by the mistake that he made. And honestly, it's hardly the worst comment that happened on her program. So we're gonna go to a little bit more of her commentary, because as of right now, that's effectively what we have out of Fox News, is her real-time response to it. It's gonna be developing fast. throughout the day. But here is a little bit of her commentary in response to Vladimir Zelensky putting out a comment last night before the war directly to the people of Russia saying, please put pressure on your leaders. We do not want a war. I know that you don't want a war. Here is how Laura Ingraham responded to those overtures.
A kind of a really pathetic display from the Ukrainian President Zelensky earlier today, President Trump, where he in Russian, he doesn't like to speak Russian, but in Russian, he was essentially imploring Vladimir Putin not to invade his country. Now we basically have the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations looking like a defeated man. Your final reaction?
Well, I think the whole thing, again, would have never happened. It shouldn't happen. And it's a very sad thing. But
yeah, that's enough of his final reaction. It would be bad enough if he had done that speech pre-invasion, desperately appealing to the people. Do not start this war that is going to be devastating. Many people will die, and it could spark something even wider. And she had said that's a pathetic display. They were in the process of being invaded. Ukrainians had already died. Buildings had already been leveled by Russian missiles. They're terrified about what's going to happen. And she said in response to that, it was a pathetic display for him to appeal for peace. This is the supposedly, again, as you said, anti-war network who thinks that diplomatic appeals for peace are pathetic displays.
They can't help themselves, John. They can't help themselves. They love strong men. They love dictators. They love autocrats. They love, like, oh, oppress me harder, daddy. That's essentially what the Republican Party has turned into. And Fox News cheerleading for the Russians to come in and invade a sovereign country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just seeing that, it's sickening. It's incredible. And not only that, but they're also arguing, ironically, the pro-America network arguing against, the American position, because they disagree with Joe Biden. And that's simply what it is too, to own the libs. Letting Russia take over Ukraine to own the libs.
Mm-hmm.
That's their priority.
Absolutely. And again, like as we've said many times, the most important thing, really the only important thing, is the people who are suffering right now and trying to not have it go any broader than it already has. But at the same time, I'm a flawed human being, and so I can't help but also want that some of the people who have been so aggressively, toxically horrible on this issue and that are in the process of doubling down on it as the invasion started, could once admit that they were wrong, change course. There have been so many horrendous takes. And no, there's not gonna be any of that. I'm not playing the video. Trump would go on to say that the reason this invasion is happening is because of the rigged election in 2020. There is just a nonstop assault on your sanity from the worst people in history, trying to drive you crazy, to drive you out of paying attention to politics. I apologize for it. We try to fight back against it, but it is just never ending.
Yeah, let me just say too, Fox News. Yeah, Fox News, the number one rule of conservatives is to never admit that you were wrong. And so they follow that. Oh yeah, no, of course we're right. We're always right, 100% right. And we've never, ever made a mistake in our entire career. Whatever you see, that's just fake news. That's the fake news media trying to gaslight you again. You know how the left is. They're going to keep doing it. But getting back to the average Ukrainian here, I read some pretty heartbreaking accounts, from people talking to reporters. And this is what's happening on the ground. And people are dying, people are fleeing for their lives, or they're terrified. When you see missiles and helicopters and jets, bombers flying overhead, I can't imagine the type of dread that it would instill into the pit of your stomach to see this going on and knowing that, or not knowing, what if they start to release bombs on my house?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen today? Who who do I know in my family that's going to not make it out of this alive? And that's just the terror that I hope no American or no anyone, whatever should ever have to feel in my ideal world, right? But man, sometimes seeing Fox News' reactions, I admit sometimes I'm a bad guy, and I think maybe they should have to feel it for just at least a few seconds, just to understand.
There are no consequences, at least in this life, unfortunately. Yeah, so everyone buckle up. Today's gonna get wild, not just in terms of the real life cost, but the attempts to spin it. Like, you think you're ready for how Tucker Carlson is gonna respond to an all-out invasion of Ukraine? You are not ready. You are not prepared. Anyway, we're gonna take our first break. When we come back, we're gonna move to some other concerns, which we're obviously going to be keeping an eye on this, and there will be a lot more coverage on the network. But understand that while we might not be talking about it for the rest of the show, obviously our hearts go out to the people that are currently suffering. So with that said, we're gonna take a break. We'll be back. There's people are always too ready to declare that things are bots, and I try to bear in mind that the world is filled with a lot of really horrible people. They don't have to be bots, but our chat is filled, as it has been filled, by comments calling us warmongers because we don't like that an invasion just happened, and spreading, obviously fraudulent talking points. I don't understand how I'm supposed to respond. People who are saying it's good that an invasion happened are anti-war, and if you're like, I don't want people to die in a war, you're warmongering. If that's your math, I didn't get far enough, I guess, in my graduate studies of math, trying to figure out that equation.
Yeah, this is like a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. You don't know how to do math. You're saying dumb things. Please stop.
Yeah, there are people literally people saying before the war, when he was just going to be moving into those disputed territories, this is a good thing. I am anti-war. You don't want it to happen. You're pro-war. But understand, this is not a flaw in logic. These people know what they're doing. They are paid, whether top up or whatever. It's not even necessary. You can crowdsource this sort of insanity. Anyway, really fast, just this sort of behind the scenes thing. So Jeff, people are saying that your audio doesn't seem like it normally is on your show. So they're asking that you check to make sure that the right mic is selected. I don't know, but that's just what people are saying who watch your content. In any event, I'm gonna respond to a few comments as we go. From the members section, thank you to all of our members. Felicia says, good morning, John, Jeff, and TYT family. After 2 cups of coffee in my new TYT large cup, I'm able to sit up. Thanks, TYT family, for keeping me sane during these insane times. Thank you. I am 2 cups in and a little bit of a monster. Shakara Ganai says, there's a concept called the fog of war. Keep that in mind when you hear most reports. Exactly, 100%. Bear that in mind even outside of war, but especially in the context of war. There are people raising money on TikTok, that are like, they're in Ukraine. It's footage of the UK that they've put war sounds over. Like, there's always scams and grifters, especially in times like this. So everyone, be careful. Leo Hoog, welcome to YouTube membership. Thank you for being with us. Kyle Cushing has been a member for a year and says, as of 1/20/2022, the doomsday clock was 100 seconds to midnight. I wonder what it would be if they updated it more than once a year. Oh, I can't even imagine how it would move in response to this. Harold AG has been a member for 2 months and says, swelled with command and mad with dizzying sway, who sees unmoved his myriads fade away, careless who lives and dies so that he gains some trivial point for which he took the pains. A poem by Percy Shelley. Thank you, Harold AG, I appreciate that. Gabby says, I thought I could stay away from news and take a mental time off. It lasted 1 day after I heard about the Russian invasion. Yeah. Good Idley says, how quickly will Ukraine fall? And then what, John? Then what? When does Putin stop without intervention, John? I have no idea. I am not the person here to figure out how fast they will be able to stand up against the Russian military. Russian military is very significant. Jeff, could you speak briefly?
Yeah.
Okay, we've moved in the wrong direction. Whatever it is that we just switched made it worse somehow. I blame Brooke in the Twitch chat who suggested it. This is not on you, Jeff. This is on Brooke. Anyway.
Are we back? We back.
Early Bird, as always, Early Bird, thank you for being here, says, I am worried that what we have here is a geriatric, narcissistic, sociopathic dictator seeing the sun set on his time on Earth, and he's willing to take the Earth down with him. Am I being hyperbolic? I think you would not be hyperbolic to say that is effectively the cause of most of the world's problems. I really thought that I could fit that in there. Anyway, we are back. I'm John Iadarola. This is the Damage Report. Very lucky to be joined by Jeff Waldorf. Jeff, if people are not familiar with your work, what do you generally tend to cover? What do you consider your beat, and where can people watch what you do?
I really like talking about conspiracy theories and debunking them.
Yeah.
And also just generally dunking on conservatives and their constant stream of madness. So if you're into watching that and seeing what all sorts of insane things people are saying, you can watch my show that's live at 4 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Waldorf Nation, of course, on YouTube, Jeff Waldorf Show on Facebook, and of course, twitch.tv/Jeff_Waldorf. You can check those out. We'll go live today at 4 p.m. Eastern.
Awesome. Well, we're going to give people a taste of one of those areas, actually multiple. We're going to have some conspiracy theories. We're definitely going to have some awful people that you are going to be free to dunk on. This is a block where we're going to talk about the ongoing culture war against the trans community, where the GOP is weaponizing people's fear and suspicion of the trans community to keep them in power. It is absolutely disgusting, absolutely craven. Here's an example of it.
It's straight evil. First off, if I was a parent and my 5th grade daughter had to sleep and shower in some kind of cabin at some summer camp that I paid money to send my child to, and there was a man calling himself a woman sleeping in her cabin, showering with her, that guy he'd be in jail. He would be in jail. Well, first off, my husband would have beat him into the ground and then he'd be in jail. But this is exactly how we need to stand up against this stuff. And then the men, this guy, Leah Thompson, I'm sorry, that's William, and he's not a she, he's a he. He should not be competing in women's swimming. No, but here's what we have to do. We have to draw the line in the sand and say we are not willing to cross it. This is such perversion, but it's also grooming children. It's grooming them to believe things that are lies and that are completely wrong. No, children are not born a certain way thinking they're another gender. It's their parents that are training them that way. It's these mothers that think it's like a handbag. They need to have a boy, a girl, and a trans child, like as if there's some kind of accessory.
A status, it's exactly, it's like Hollywood stars and all the things they've engaged in. Exactly. Look at
So that is two absolutely sick individuals, Alex Jones and Marjorie Greene. I don't know if Marjorie Greene, who ostensibly is an elected congresswoman, she doesn't seem to care about that position and doesn't have access to committee hearings and things like that. Maybe she's trying out for his co-host, I don't know. But they decided that they would team up to talk about how not only trans people should be locked up, but before you lock them up, she spoke favorably about her husband beating a trans woman in this case. So that is an elected congresswoman fantasizing about violence against a community that already experiences an absolute epidemic of violence on a daily basis, which generally is ignored. Now she is encouraging more of it, Jeff.
Yeah, look, I already originally thought the dead naming was bad enough, but no. Now we're at violence. Now we're at encouraging violence against a community that already sees, as you pointed out, an incredible amount of violence. This cannot end well, but understand that that's exactly what they're trying to do. That's exactly what their goal is to try to fearmonger against the trans community. They used to do it to the gay community, now they're doing it to the trans community, and now, of course, they're using it as a way to try to stay in power, essentially, by scaring the crap out of people, by saying things that are fundamentally untrue. He goes and talks about how, it's the grooming of the children. No, it's the parents that are doing it. Now, what's interesting about that is, John, you and I have probably covered about how conservatives have been saying, well, the parents need to choose what books they have in their classroom, well, what kind of educations they get. Well, they seem to trust the parents on that, but yet also are making the assertion that the parents are now forcing people to be trans. Mm-hmm. What a ridiculous and counterfactual argument. And it's also counter to their own arguments about, hey, we should give parental rights and we should have more respect for parents' choices.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you bring that up. We're gonna talk more about Texas in just a little bit. But the reason I want to make sure that we cover both of these stories is that, like, most of the people who watch our show are they are regular, normal, sane people. They don't spend a lot of time watching InfoWars or the Daily Wire or the Daily Caller and stuff. So you may not understand that this is a constant thing. They talk about the trans community on literally a daily basis. Never to the community, by the way. You will never see them bringing on a trans activist or a regular trans person to talk about their life experience, because they're not interested in learning, evolving, developing empathy, and they certainly don't want to be a platform for their viewers doing that. No, they talk at their base about the community, demonizing and inspiring not just a lack of respect for the inherent human worth of these individuals, but no, you can beat them. You can be. Well, if you just find out that a person is trans, you should beat them. Think about how you've got a congresswoman talking about how cool it would be if her husband beat someone. And there's probably not going to be any response. We're covering this. I'm sure anyone who comes across the story is going to be disgusted by it, but it is just the latest horrendous, violent thing coming out of Marjorie Greene's mouth. Is Nancy Pelosi going to censure her over this? Standing in solidarity with the trans community? Can we even spare the time every day for the constant violent rhetoric coming out of Marjorie Greene's mouth? And by the way, again, this is just raising awareness. I'm not calling for anyone's shows to be taken down. Alex Jones, by the way, is technically banned from Spotify, showing that Spotify can ban shows when they want to. But if you go on Spotify, you can still see full versions of a show. He is technically banned, but they are still allowed to upload. You can see multiple versions of it that people upload. So they are providing a platform for calls for violence against the trans community. Any other thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, going back to how they have to fearmonger about this stuff because they literally have nothing else. I mean, do you ever hear Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about actual workers, the needs of workers, wages, things like that? I know every once in a while, Marjorie Taylor Greene will come up with this insane thing called corporate communism, which again makes absolutely no sense. And then we'll support the Canadian truckers, many of whom are not actually truckers, at least the organizers were, and were members of white nationalist neo-Nazi movements that weren't at all in favor of things like, I don't know, higher wages, better working conditions, and things that would actually help real Canadian truckers on the ground. And so they would support things like that, those movements, but they don't actually support regular working people. What is one thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene has actually tried to accomplish for the average American worker? Nothing. You can't come up with anything, and she can't do anything anyway because she has no committee assignments because she got kicked off all of them. And so that's all they have to default to. And by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene says she has nothing to do. That's why she's always on these different shows. That's why she's constantly talking to Steve Bannon, constantly talking to now Alex Jones, which, by the way, that is a marriage created in hell right there.
Yeah.
Where you have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alex Jones on the same show. They're going to talk about the next new conspiracy theory, and maybe maybe they bonded over their love of anti-Semitic laser force fire conspiracies. I don't know, but all I know is that it is bad for the trans people, for the trans community, who is already facing so much hate and discrimination, and it's 100%. Going to get worse for them.
Yeah, 100%. Bear in mind, she thinks that it is inherently dangerous to have a trans person near a kid. She traveled to DC to stalk the teen survivors of mass shootings. Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to other news that we'd alluded to just a little bit ago. Greg Abbott is continuing his absolutely disgusting campaign against trans kids inside of Texas. Take a look at this. It's a letter from the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services that they sent out just yesterday. Greg Abbott wrote that, quote, a number of so-called sex change procedures constitute child abuse under existing Texas law, and directed the agency to, quote, conduct a prompt and thorough investigation of any instances of a wide variety of elective procedures for gender transitioning, including reassignment surgeries, mastectomies, removals of otherwise healthy body parts, and administration of puberty-blocking drugs. That letter was shared to a number of different government agencies inside of Texas and states that people in certain occupations, like doctors and teachers, have a duty to report any of these instances of care for trans youth, DFPS, or risk criminal penalties. So again, it is the Karenization of politics. It is the creation of everyone is obligated and incentivized financially to snitch on anyone living their life. And in this case, if you are a parent of a trans kid and you accept and love and understand your kid, if you are helping them to live the life that they want to live, you are going to be hounded and hunted down by any doctor who finds out about this, any government employee who finds out about this. You are gonna have to live your life in fear. That is the political culture that they are building there in Texas, Jeff.
Yeah, it's almost Orwellian when you think about it, turning neighbors, friends against each other, all over, this insane culture war issue of trying to go and attack trans people. And again, all the stuff, you read through the letter and it's filled with massive misconceptions, right? And it's all couched in, but we got to protect the children. We got to protect the children. Well, the people who are most at risk are trans youth that are getting bullied and attacked in schools. And they have higher risks of suicide and anxiety and depression, not as a result of inherently being trans. It's about how they're being treated for being trans, for being just who they are. And of course, the misconceptions about things like puberty blockers, which, by the way, are not permanent. You can stop those, and then all they do is delay the onset. You can stop it at any time when you make a decision. Hormones, you can also stop at any time. And nobody under 18, at least it's incredibly, incredibly rare, can get the gender sex reassignment surgery. And so what they're doing is
it's an invented fantasy that they're using to scare people.
Yes, massive scaremonger tactics, and just using. And once again, we've seen the rhetoric before when it came to the gay community, how they're grooming children. It's a danger to children. It's the children that are at risk. And once again, it is just harming the most at-risk children. And so you really want to protect the children. Maybe you should keep them away from Republicans.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, I'm glad that you mentioned the thing about the lie that they're telling about the puberty blocking drugs. They are pretending that all we're trying to do is stop them from having irreversible decisions made before they reach 18. That is a very clever little sleight of hand, because of course what they're trying to stop people from doing is taking puberty blocking drugs, which they are reversible, block them from doing it so that they will experience puberty, which is far less reversible, and they know that that's the entire point. By the way, I want to read this comment here from Twitter account Trungles, who says, most queer kids have at some point in their childhood considered the possibility that they might have to go it alone in case their coming out goes badly. And now Abbott wants to deprive the trans kids who do have loving parents of their family support. Just evil. Goes on to say, pro-family, unless a family loves their trans kids. And all of this has nothing to do with concern. They don't care at all about these people. It is the ultimate example of the culture war. People throw that term around. I try to be very careful about what I mean when I use a term like that. Generally, what I consider to be the most disgusting culture war topics are things that matter in no way to the people launching the attacks, but can be the most important life and death issues to the people who will suffer as a result of the fake artificial elevation of this issue. That is what they're doing. They're doing it to maintain their political power. They don't care about the cost in terms of suffering and lack of acceptance, the potential rise in suicides that could result from a thing like this. They don't care at all. And if you're a conservative watching this, I understand there's a good chance you love this and you think, finally, we've got a governor who cares about the issues I care about. I've been ignored by politicians for so long. But bear in mind, when you used to talk about being ignored, I don't remember them all saying, none of these coastal elites get what I think about trans kids. You pretended it was economic. And what, is your mortgage more secure if they stop kids from taking puberty blocking drugs? Your wage is gonna go up. You don't have to worry about medical bankruptcy if they stop these kids from being accepted by their families, by the state. How has your life improved as a result of this? You know that this is a con, that you're being played. Wake up, Jesus. Final thoughts, Jeff, before we close out this block.
Oh, I guess we're done with the.
Sorry, no. If you have a quick last thought, feel free.
Oh, I was just going to say, Greg Abbott, this entire attack on trans people, once again, it's not about protecting children. It's really about trying to protect Greg Abbott, as you said, because he doesn't like to protect people in Texas when it comes to winter storms, when it comes to losing their heat and electricity. So they need a little bit of a distraction away from the failures of their actual government.
Exactly. Oh, and we'll be talking about those energy issues as well. We've got a lot more to come. Everybody, so don't go anywhere. Jeff and I'll be right back. This is the most Greg Abbott-y program we have ever done, and I pray will ever do. But yeah, Jeff was totally right. All this is about helping him out politically, either to ward off Beto O'Rourke, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or because Greg Abbott, he just wants to set himself up to get 2% in the Republican primary in 2024 and then fade into the darkness again. And if a few people have to die on the way, what cost is that to him? Seymour DeMonica has been a member on YouTube for 6 months and says, I know that since LGBTQ plus hate makes it personal for a lot of people, if I may bring some levity.
No.
I like some of those songs.
Bangers. There were some bangers, yeah.
One of the most amazing things in pop culture for me was the discovery that those songs were real songs. They were not made for the games.
Oh yeah, there was this one about the chopping the meat or something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't. You know what I'm talking about then, right?
Yeah, and Uranium Fever, and there's a lot of crazy songs. Lydia Tenwald. Thank you, Lisa Fernandez. Thank you for becoming members. Dango Bangle, I appreciate it. By the way, we haven't talked much about membership on YouTube, but basically we have a couple of different tiers. If you want access to things like emojis and a badge next to your name, all of our members get access to that. At tier 2, you get access to a weekly top 10 list that Francesca Fiorentini and I do, sometimes about politics, sometimes about pop culture or just life stuff. And at tier 3, we have a monthly sort of members hangout, and that is actually happening later on today. So at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, we're just gonna be hanging out and chatting about whatever our members want. So if you're interested in that, that is coming up very soon. Also coming up soon is our State of the Union and Texas primary coverage. So that is gonna be a big two-steppy sort of night. We've not only got Joe Biden's State of the Union, which I'm sure will just be so entertaining and fiery. It won't, but our commentary hopefully will be. As well as the Texas primary, in which you can see Jessica Cisneros facing off once again against Henry Cuellar. Very high hopes for that primary, and that will be coming up. That coverage will be coming up 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on March 1st. Cenk will be there, and Anna Kasparian, myself, and Francesca Fiorentini. So should be a lot of fun. Definitely look forward to that. We have time, right? Okay, minute and a half. I'm gonna read some of these comments. Brickhouse Mama says, John, I've called my son Hank the Tank since he was born. Now it sends him into giggle fits thanks to the rotund bear story. Okay, that's very funny. I like that. Luis says, I find it interesting how the same people who don't believe the neo-Nazis at the truckers convoy don't delegitimize the convoy, also justify Putin's actions because of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Yeah, I don't expect consistency out of basically anyone, except, I don't know, Bernie. At this point, Marcus Otero says, people calling you warmongers are like Wormtongue calling Eomer a warmonger for calling out the orcs with Saruman's mark. That is a fascinatingly accurate analogy right there coming out of the Lord of the Rings. It is so like that. Gunidli says, how quickly will Ukraine fall? And then, I read that. Again, I don't know. I don't know. People are saying relatively quickly. That seems to be the concern coming from the Ukrainian government. And Carhart says, oh, I read that as well. Thank you. We're getting a couple of duplicates, but anyway, thank you for the super chats, whether once or twice. Gabby says, okay, but John, what video game do you want to live in? Zelda, Mario Kart, Goat Simulator? Well, from what I'm seeing, not Elden Ring. I don't think that's what I would choose. I'm gonna go with, Super Mario World looks pretty sweet. A couple of those worlds back in the day were candy and sweets based. I could see making a life in one of those. But anyway, we'll continue living the life in this wacky world we're in. We've got more news coming up after this. Okay, everyone, prepare yourself. We're still on Texas news. It's gonna be rough in a couple of different areas, but let's talk about this. Back during the 2020 racial justice and criminal justice protests that were going on, there was a wave of police violence and brutality against protesters. We saw this in Texas as well. And now here comes Republican Governor Greg Abbott to say those cops that have been identified for committing acts of police brutality in Austin, no, they're actually great. And you know what? Maybe there shouldn't be any consequences whatsoever for them. He said just yesterday that the indictment of 19 Austin police officers on assault charges stemming from those protests back in May of 2020 are wrong. And he dangled the possibility of potential pardons for them, going way out of his way to protect them from consequences which we know from long experience are very rare when it comes to cops committing acts of violence like this. They shot and injured one woman back during those protests. I mean, this is as bad effectively as it gets in this anti-protest violence. And so, by the way, one of them, who we will focus more on in a little bit, is a Texas House candidate now, Justin Berry. He was one of those police officers attacking protesters just a couple of years ago. Anyway, Jeff, what do you think? Pardons for cops? I mean, it's certainly precedented. Trump would talk this same way about cops using violence against protesters just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's really par for the course at this point. Of course, they're going to defend police. Only, of course, when they crack Black Lives Matter protesters' bills. When it comes to January 6th rioters, then that's when the cops are bad. Mm-hmm. That's when they actually hoist up their ACAB flag, ironically. Mm-hmm. But generally, no, it really matters to them who the cops go after. And any protests against racial justice, any protests against pipelines or big corporations, banks, the right wing is always going to support cops cracking heads because they are authoritarians at heart. As I said earlier today, oppress me harder, daddy. That is, the tagline for the Republican Party, and not just oppress me, but oppress everyone else. That doesn't
exactly. Like. Yeah. Oh, but by the way, when you get into the power structure on the Republican side, not a fan of any sort of consequences. Clearly, we'll have a story a little bit later on the show about that. But no, if it's putting down a left-wing protest, that's what they're there for. Right-wing protests, obviously hands off and everything. I believe in consistency. Don't needlessly attack protesters of any variety, but they've been able to draw a little bit more fine lines there. Anyway, each officer currently faces 2 counts of aggravated assault, a first-degree felony when committed by a law enforcement officer, punishable by up to 99 years in prison or a fine of up to $10,000. Abbott says those officers should be praised for their efforts, not prosecuted. Time will tell whether the accusations against the courageous Austin police officers is a political sham. Oh, he's not weighing in at all now, though. Time will also tell whether I, as governor, must take action to exonerate any police officer unjustly persecuted. Unjustly persecuted means that you are one of the 1%, 0.1% of cops that face anything like consequences for your actions. If you're one of those who slips through the cracks of the incredibly protective shield that stops justice from coming for law enforcement officers, then you've been prosecuted and you will be protected by Greg Abbott. That's what he's saying to us. Unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of hours, so we're gonna jump ahead to our next story. We're not done with Greg Abbott though. Everyone, hold on to your butts. Greg Abbott is now facing accusations that in addition to the deaths that occurred during the horrendous winter storm last year when the Texas power grid failed, predictably because regulations were not in place to force them to weatherize against the weather that was coming, not only did people die, but there were also, in the wake of it, incredibly high energy costs. Who's responsible for that? Well, according to people who would know, Greg Abbott himself. And he is now being attacked over this issue by people like Beto O'Rourke, who of course is hoping to unseat Greg Abbott, with Beto O'Rourke saying this governor isn't looking out for us. He said Abbott screwed us and he'll continue to screw us until we vote him out. And so what is this all about? Well, Bill Magnus is the former CEO of what's known as ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, that said that as power plants were starting to come back online, Abbott said we need to do whatever is necessary to stop more blackouts. So what we do is we absolutely jack up power prices. And so they went at one point, people are saying as much as 100 times the occasional minimum price. That was according to him. Now, I like the idea of not wanting there to be blackouts to stop people from dying. There are, let's admit, other ways to do that, including putting the financial onus not on the buyers of the energy, but on the providers of it, having them actually weatherize their system so that they can survive this sort of weather. But that is not the direction they went in ahead of this storm, and they haven't done it in the year since either, Jeff.
Yeah, the funniest thing about that name is it's the Reliability Council.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very reliable. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever there's just a tiny flurry, it seems like that power system just inevitably implodes, and people are stuck holding the bag, holding the bill. And again, it's because of Texas's deregulated power grid, making sure that these power providers can jack up the price as much as they want, and no one will put a stop to it. And apparently, Greg Abbott thinks, hey, that's great. Yes, let's gouge the people during an emergency. Wonderful, but we're only doing it so that we can keep the power on. Really, you can't keep the power on without jacking up the price? Is that a prerequisite? Like, oh, sorry, I can't push the button, the hypothetical button to keep the power on, unless we jack up the price to an incredibly expensive, thing where nobody will be able to actually afford and will make me look terrible. But you know what? Corporations, energy companies, we prefer them. So let's just go ahead with that. Great idea. Great.
And I'm sure people remember the absolutely massive bills that people were getting, because it's not like you, as the price was jacked up, you had to opt into the higher price. You just hit by absolutely massive bills. People in the chat are saying they're still paying double all this time after. And again, it's not just about this as the choice. It's that they ignored the warnings that came for years leading up to this. There had been other instances like this. They might not have killed 250 people or done nearly $300 billion in damage, but the warnings were out there. And to not make changes afterward is even more indefensible. This is an absolutely abhorrent position that he took. He has done nothing to make good on it. Now, that said, we are unfortunately out of our first hour. Thank you to all of us, all of those on our linear platforms. If you're on Twitch, YouTube, our members app, we do have more, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm John Iadarola, joined by Jeff Waldorf. Jeff, thank you again for joining us. Nice to have you here.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. Even with my apparently leftist audio.
I feel like it sounds a little bit better. Maybe I just got used to it, but I feel like it sounds better. Anyway, thank you everyone for being here. We've still got a few more stories to get to, and then the fun continues with Indisputable. Dr. Rashad Ritchie will be joined by Ben Carollo. Grayson Quay will be on for a debate as well. And then, buckle up, because main show coverage of the war in Ukraine is probably, I assume Cenk is gonna go off. Probably also about the fervor over his tweet that he sent out. People went crazy. That's what they do, especially in regard to Cenk. Anyway, I want to read a few of your comments. Melly sent in a super chat to say, my first super chat, and I would like to say thank you for keeping me informed. On that note, MTG is a dumpster fire of a human being. Agreed, and thank you. Gabby says, this is why I had a sleepless night since I still have family in Kiev and no contact though. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, I don't have any family in Ukraine. I did feel really bad in real time for Terrell Jermaine Starr, who's joined us several times. He's reporting from Kiev. He seems totally okay. He's put up videos since then. We talked about what this sort of war might look like just a week or two ago. So that's up on the channel if you want to see. Bernie the Kiwi Dragon says, so the surgeries are child abuse, but gay conversion therapies aren't. The hypocrisy is endless. Shout out to Jeff. I can't always catch your show, but your cool collected insight is appreciated.
Thank you.
I like it. Anthony says, another Lord of the Rings reference. When Wormtongue accused Gandalf of lying, the wizard replied, the untrustworthy are ever mistrustful. Grima was a right winger. Definitely, definitely. Also, I don't remember the name of the guy in the Hobbit ones, but similar reasons. Anyway, oh, by the way, people are calling out, if you want to donate, we're gonna try to curate some good ways to help in Ukraine, but the Trevor Project, obviously domestically, considering the stories that we've been talking about today. Okay, with that, let's get into one of the weirder stories of this week. Take a look at this.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, sir? I'm Sebastian, Sarasota Police Department. You're on audio and video recording. The reason for the stop, you were observed going 57 and a 40, and you were on your phone texting while you were doing that. That was at Euclid and Fruitville. You don't need to point at the officer. I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing in the direction where it was. I'll just call the chief, how's that? Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, so what you saw right there was a GOP House candidate being pulled over, apparently for speeding as well as texting while driving, immediately starting a conflict with that cop. Don't point at me. Okay, that's fine. I don't like to be pointed at either. But when a cop tells you that you've done this, your response cannot be, I'll just call the chief then. This person apparently has a pretty cushy relationship with the cops. Well, I'm sure that's where the conflict ends though. He's not gonna you don't know who I am, her, or anything like that. Well, let's take a look at a little bit more of that interaction.
Can I see your license? Right? Yes, sir, I do. Can I see your license, registration, insurance, please? You can do this? Yes, sir. I'm sorry? I still have a job to do, sir. Yeah, what's your name? Officer Veskin. It's going to be on the citation. Can I see your insurance, registration, and your license, please? Sir, can I have your paperwork, please? 7 years, sir. Can I see your registration, please? You're not going to give me your registration, sir. You arrest me? I'm asking you if you're going to produce me with your registration. You don't have it on you?
Look, go call the chief. Tell him how rude you just been to me. Play him this video.
Okay.
Then you call Marlon Brown. Then you call the mayor.
Okay.
They're not okay, though. I'm telling you what to do.
Okay, sir, are you refusing to produce your registration? I'm asking you if you have your registration.
You're making career decisions.
Okay,
Why
sir.
are you doing this?
Sir, because you were speeding and you were texting.
Okay, Jeff, there was a lot in there. Basically, the full checklist of the do you know who I am's, calling her history to question. He hit a lot of points there.
Yeah. Never have I seen before such Karen behavior. Total Karening out. You know who I am. Oh, why didn't I just call the manager?
Exactly.
All he needs is that nice little hair bob, and it would be complete, absolutely complete. Amazing, amazing. This is the pro police crowd.
Exactly. And by the way, cops can be wrong when they pull you over. You could be frustrated. You get to be frustrated. Like, I thought it was just comply though. I thought that's the advice. Just comply, just do what they say. That dude was doing everything except complying. He was doing a little jig, dancing around her. Because again, the whole anti-elite thing, the anti-establishment thing, that is a charade. They don't mean it. They get into office saying they're against the elites, and then as soon as they're in, don't you know who they are? How dare you come with your give me your registrations? I don't have to comply with that. I'm powerful. I have powerful friends. I'm the elite now. That is how this game is played.
Yeah, and especially telling because he's also not black. Did you notice that? If it were a black person, and maybe even another cop, to be very charitable to her, if it were another cop, if it were a black person, it would be a very, very different conversation that they would be having, possibly involving an arrest for resisting arrest. I can't believe you would resist arrest like this. I can't believe you would, treat a cop with such disrespect. How dare you?
Yeah, potentially
about this. These unruly people. Let me tell you.
These unruly white politicians. Yeah, 100%. And look, he tries to scare her off at multiple points. If we play the next video, you'll see a bit more of that. But and she doesn't back off. But she might still have been a little bit scared. I would be. Like if you're just a regular cop and this guy does know the chief, there's all sorts of corruption and favoritism and that sort of thing. I would have been scared too if I were her. In any event, let's go to this last video for a little bit more.
Call the supervisor. I just spoke to your boss.
Okay.
That's not okay.
You want your paperwork?
Is it your Russian immigrant status that makes you talk to people like this?
10-14-6.
Call the supervisor.
14 dispatch, can you have my supervisor respond, please?
Yeah. And then we'll see who goes.
Okay. You don't want your paperwork?
6142, can you be 51 Great Bell Street? You don't have a warrant.
Sir, you're gonna be issued a citation.
Anything you have to say. I'll wait for the supervisor.
You can wait for the supervisor, but I'm gonna go through what I need to go through.
No, I have no interest.
You are gonna make sure you do a prior to submission of payment.
You know what he said about you? You want to hear what he said about you?
He could say all he wants about me. I got a job to do, sir.
Yeah. You know what he said about you?
If you fail to complete,
like this.
Okay.
And he's going to have you again.
And that's fine.
It's not fine. Why do you keep saying it's fine,
sir?
I'm a law-abiding.
Okay, so I feel bad for it. He goes on and on and on, but there, I mean, like I think the biggest point is, do you think it's your Russian immigrant status that makes you act this way? I mean, that's a weird anti-immigrant comment, but it also is. Like, what is he threatening to deport her? And how does he know that? Like, he just talked to the chief, and now he knows that she's a Russian immigrant. This whole thing is so disgusting.
And let me just add that there might be a little bit of a misogynistic component to this as well. Do you think that you would treat a 6'2" male Russian immigrant with the same kind of disdain, with the same kind of let me call your manager? So I think it has to do with both of those things. Yes, I don't like that I got pulled over. How dare you? I'm an elected official. I'm an elite. I can do whatever the heck I want, and you can't tell me what to do. I'm your boss. I pay your salary.
Yeah.
No, it's not true. But all these different excuses because he got caught speeding. And really, this entire thing could have been going back to the comply thing, right? It could have been easily solved. Like, oh, okay, sorry, officer. Here you go. Here's my information, and then you're in and out in 5 minutes. But no, you got to carry it out because how dare you actually ever do anything or touch me whatsoever in any way?
Yeah, including like I refuse to take the card back, so you put it in my car and say, "How dare you? You don't have a warrant to do that, dude." She's putting out a card. Like, honestly, back off. Like, you know how many videos we've shown? Yeah, he has rights. That is the mildest cop video we've ever played on the show, dude. Back off. And the I'm a law-abiding citizen. You're in the process of very specifically not being a law-abiding citizen. How about you abide some of these laws right now? And look, and if the cops do something wrong, there will be nobody quicker to have your back than us. That's not what is happening here. In response, he said, I'm not gonna justify my poor temper on that day or attempt to mitigate it in any way. There will be some who say, it's not the first time I've acted out, and they'd be right. I have faults, and one of them is to be overly aggressive on occasion when I'm challenged. In the political arena, that is possibly a good thing, but on a personal level, it's not. I don't know if it's weirdly anti-immigrant. I don't think it's good in the political arena either, Martin Hyde. But will you be shocked to find out that he's been endorsed by Roger Stone and Michael Flynn? Of course, both of them were the recipients of largesse judicially from President Donald Trump, who gave them pardons. So why wouldn't you expect? No, I am part of the elite class. There are no laws that apply to people like us. And that is very much how he's acting there.
Yeah, and again, big surprise that this is happening in Florida, of all places. And of course, to, Roger Stone, who isn't exactly good at not breaking the law. They had to have done crime first for them to be able to get pardons. So big surprise, criminals backing criminals, birds of a feather, crime together.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, as I always say, if you're conservative and you're watching this, just like start to wake up. And if you do wake up, we'll accept you. So don't be afraid of waking up to the fact that they are conning you. This is not about a swamp. This is not about fighting the establishment. This is about becoming the establishment. That's all it is. It's a new system, but it also sucks.
But if you wake up, you become woke, and that's bad.
That's true. That's true. Worst thing ever. Okay, so we've got time for a couple more stories. Everyone prepare yourself. Let's jump into this.
Was the 6 months, this is what it was previously, so you can see how long this list is under social, emotional, language, cognitive, movement, and physical. Here is the updated list in 2020. I mean, they've just completely wiped out half the list because they're realizing now, okay, we've been quietly abusing children. We're telling everybody to wear a mask, to treat children like they're all dirty and scary. I mean, just anecdotally, my husband and I, we had a baby nurse. She came in, she walked in a mask, and we said, oh, you don't have to wear that. And she said, no, I choose to wear this. I just thought to myself, my infant child is going to look up in the middle of the night and see a person wearing a mask that they don't recognize, and goodbye, we don't need you in this house. If you're afraid of my baby, we don't need you in this household.
Okay, so that is Candace Owens talking about a combination of a couple different things. Her own personal views on nurses being allowed to consent or not to wearing a mask, as well as guidelines for expectations of what a certain percentage of babies will be able to do behaviorally by a certain age. There's a mishmash of a lot of stuff there, Jeff. But I love the idea that her principal issue is you can't wear a mask, even if you think it's for your own safety or the safety of other patients, because in the middle of the night, my infant will look at you and not know who you are. Whereas if you had the mask off, then the infant would be like, oh, you're my nurse, that's where I know you from. Well, I feel totally comfortable now with whatever you're gonna do. I was gonna fight you otherwise as a baby. I was gonna ward you off because I can't see your face. But now I'll consent to all of this. That's how babies act. Right,
Totally
Jeff?
rational. Totally rational, yes. I love the irony of this being somebody who believes in hey, I believe in freedom, but you don't have the freedom to wear a mask if you choose to wear it. Very, very, very strange. Let me just say that, look, no, maybe I shouldn't say that about Candace Owens. That might be going a little bit too far. Okay. Something about being, her baby afraid of her face.
Yeah, we'll leave it to her to go too far. There's more than enough there that we can be very comfortable criticizing, including, by the way, that of all of the places to die on the hill of I'm going to have an issue with people choosing a mask. Again, we have moved so far beyond just how dare you require me to wear a mask. I'm now going to judge you. And she said, I'm not going to work with you. She's saying you don't get to do your job. This is not at Disney or Panera. This is a nurse in a medical context that you're now going to proactively discriminate against based on the fact that she's wearing a mask. They used to wear masks. COVID isn't the first illness. There were masks before. They've been brought into this conflict because they stopped germs. But if she was having brain surgery, would she have an issue with the doctor covering up then? How dare you wash your hands? Don't wear those scrubs. You should be wearing manure-stained overalls, because otherwise you're implying that I'm dirty in some way. No, the whole thing is absolutely madness. And she is a thought leader on the right. That is the weird situation we found ourselves in.
Thought leader, that's a good one. That's a good one. No, John, you understand, we have to free the doctors from the mask. You realize that like they can't breathe. They're not able to breathe when they're doing those 6 to 8 hour long surgeries. So we got to free them. We got to free them from the tyranny of soap. Free them from the tyranny of gloves. I mean, we can't have anything. No safety measures, because then if you're using safety measures, well, you're obviously you're weak, fragile, and not masculine enough to we have freedom. We believe in freedom, pure freedom.
Yeah, and which the larger point that she was trying to make was that how dare the CDC put out new guidelines about like, here's some behavioral like touchstones that you should expect for your baby. No, the only reason they were talking about that was for her to say, we've ruined a generation because of masks. You'll know we did not ruin a generation because countless kids have become orphans as a result of their parents dying from COVID, or having to experience their parents having an extended hospital stay, or the long-term economic consequences of what's gonna happen to those families who had to pay tons of money because of the cost of their experience at hospital. That is not the sort of thing that has ruined these kids or will have any lasting impact on them. It's that they once saw their parent in a mask. That is the thing that is going to wreck them. So she has her finger on the pulse of future threats to America.
Yeah.
Okay. No final thought.
Can I add one more thing? Yeah. The people that pay Candace Owens have also ruined a generation. I mean, when you look at what people are dealing with nowadays, with rising home prices, inflation, the fact that wages have not, kept up, the cost of college, student loan debt, etc. The fact that the planet is burning. In some cases, the ocean is on fire, or sporadically catches on fire. That's not a normal thing. Yes, that's ruining a generation. But no, it's not the current generation and the next generation that's being ruined by all of the impacts, the long-term impacts of those things that have happened on our world and our society. No, it's the fact that you're wearing a mask during a pandemic. That's the line. That's the line. We can't cross that line. We're too far. We're too far. Matt.
Obviously, yeah, I agree. Okay, before we move to our last story of the day, I'm gonna read just a couple of your comments. Heather Payne sent in a super chat saying, my 4th grade kid had a 9-year-old trans girl in their cabin at camp. In no way is a 9-year-old girl a man, and a grown man attacking a child like that would be rightly arrested. Well, look, it got a little bit muddled in her telling. I believe the core of her call for violence was to attack a non-binary camp counselor. There might have also been implications of violence for the kids, but that's generally what I saw. So just to be clear. Over on Twitch, thank you to Jordani for being with us for 12 months. Holy Beer Dragon gifted 10 community subs. That is so nice of you. Thank you. The Artsy Fartsy Dragon's been here for 1 year with the squad. Thank you, appreciate that. Tai Chi Chuan Dragon's been here for 10 months. That's 10 months. Thanks, John and the Dragon Squad. Lots of love to all of you, and lots of love returned right back. Polar Bear Dragon's been here for 10 months. Big old 10 months day in the audience right now. Thank you. Donkey Teeth for 8 months. Very nice of you. Key John for 21 months says, what are dark days to be subscribed for 21 months? Thank you for being there for us anyway, making the news at least a little endurable. Thank you, much appreciated. Okay, with that, let's launch into this last story. Okay, no, we're doing it, Sophie, don't worry, okay. Congressman Greg Stuebe is not gonna take these high gas prices anymore, and he's also not gonna do anything about his life choices to mitigate high gas prices. He tweeted this, $167 to fill up my truck today in Arcadia. Thanks, Joe Biden, and you can see that, yes, he did have to spend $167. That is a lot, and I am appalled by that number and also the number below it, because he just pumped 43.8 gallons, which can happen. That is not photoshopped. You can actually pump that many gallons. assuming that you have presumably a Ford F-Series Super Duty. Specifically, we can show you a picture. It is apparently the only truck or the only like normal thing that a person would drive that has a tank that big. So is he right to point out the gas prices are high? Yes, they are high. They're lower in his area than they are in mine, so a little bit of jealousy for me for that. But he has chosen to literally create the worst gas situation for him. He gets 15 miles to the gallon on the highway, better than they used to back in the day, still not great. If you're worried about your gas prices, there are other cars that you could consider. In fact, in this case, there's every other car you could consider that would probably be better for you in terms of gas prices. Jeff, what do you think?
It's cutting off your nose to spite your face. I mean, it's so simple. Let's buy the biggest, most gigantic truck and then complain about putting gas in it. Sure. That's probably the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's incredible that they go to these lengths, and they're bringing back, by the way, reintroducing Thanks Obama, but just with Thanks Biden. Interesting.
I like throwbacks. I like remakes.
Yeah, well, they're bringing back the old hits, right? They're going to all those things, butter emails, Hillary Clinton, all this stuff. Now, thanks, Joe Biden. For the guy who forced me to buy a gigantic truck that cost a lot to fill up. Yes, it was Joe Biden's fault because he's a gigantic fan of big trucks, while also simultaneously being such a communist that he is making us all abandon cars, hamburgers, and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, that is available with a diesel. He chose not to go in that direction. Are there people that need something like that? Probably not, but sure. There are some contractors, things like that. He's a congressman. Doesn't need a truck like that. Let's just say there are light duty trucks that are available to get much better gas mileage. There are electric versions of these. I hear the new Ford F-150 Lightning is awesome. The Rivian. Look into these things. You can save yourself a little bit of money potentially, Congressman Greg Stuebe. Okay, with that, we unfortunately are out of time. Jeff, great as always to have you on. Where can people follow your work?
You can go to my YouTube channel, subscribe at Waldorf Nation. And of course, you can follow us on Twitch, Jeff_Waldorf, that's twitch.tv, Jeff_Waldorf. And of course, on Facebook, facebook.com/Jeff Waldorf Show. I should really make those all the same. And then, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff's Politics. And so, Jeff's Politics on Twitter. That's where you can find my tweets and my show, my YouTube videos, and of course, my live stream at 4 p.m. Eastern, 5 days a week.
Awesome. Thanks again, man. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
And for those of you watching at home, sorry, what was that?
I said bye, Dragon Squad.
Thank you. We appreciate it. For those of you watching at home, Indisputable is up next. Dr. Rashad Ritchie is going to be on also at 12. So in 34 minutes, the Tier 3 members hangout is going to be happening. So hope to see you all there. If you're a member, you can join up. If you'd like to become a member, upgrade your membership, that's also an opportunity. We have fun. We hang out every month. Hope to see you there. I promise I will look a little bit more put together for the hangout. But until then, also, Garbage Person of the Week. Go and vote on the community tab at the YouTube channel. Brett and I are going to throw away some absolute garbage. There's been so much. Wait to find out what that is tomorrow. But until then, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and we'll see you soon.